Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission here, as always, is pretty straightforward. We take a legendary mystery, we gather all the sources we can find, the science, the history, the wilder claims, and we try to figure out where the facts stop. And the myth, well, takes over.
And today, we are charting a course straight into probably the most infamous patch of water on Earth. We're talking, of course, about the Bermuda Triangle. You know, it's got that reputation, doesn't it? The most murderous, cunning, and unpredictable corner of the planet. That's how some describe it.
That really is the reputation. And looking at our sources, the core problem is, well, it's staggering. Over the years, different writers claim something like, 50 ships and maybe 20 planes, and potentially thousands of people just gone. Vanished without a trace in this one part of the Atlantic.
That's the central claim. So this deep dive is all about unpacking those stories, incident by incident, theory by theory, and really scrutinizing the evidence, or lack thereof.
But we have to start with this really fundamental contradiction, don't we? Because it's kind of the key to the whole thing.
Absolutely. The big paradox is, despite being world famous, infamous even, the Bermuda Triangle isn't actually on any official map. Like, zero.
No official charts, no government recognition.
None. The U.S. Navy, the Coast Guard, international maritime bodies, none of them recognize it as a distinct region with unique hazards. It's not a formal navigational zone.
So, in a way, the mystery only exists in stories in popular culture.
Pretty much. It lives in our collective imagination, fueled by decades of books and articles.
Okay, so if it's not official, how do people even define where it is? And why do the numbers, the estimated losses, vary so much?
That's a great point, because the boundaries are completely unofficial, and frankly, they shift depending on who's telling the story. Generally, though, people draw a rough triangle connecting the southeastern coast of the U.S., say Miami,
right,
down to Puerto Rico, and then up to the island of Bermuda in the mid-Atlantic.
But the size difference in those definitions is huge. I saw figures ranging from, 1.3 million square kilometers up to nearly 4 million.
Exactly. That's an enormous difference. We're talking an area potentially as large as India or a big chunk of Europe. And look, if you draw a massive enough box over a busy ocean, you're bound to find some unexplained incidents within it, right?
Makes sense. The flexible boundary kind of helps build the case, doesn't it?
It's fundamental to constructing the myth, absolutely. You can pick and choose incidents that fit your narrative.
Okay, but it wasn't always called the Bermuda Triangle. When did that specific name actually catch on? We need to pinpoint that moment.
We can do that precisely. While stories of strange disappearances had been around for ages, the actual phrase Bermuda Triangle was coined in 1964.
Aye.
An American author named Vincent Hayes Gaddis. He read a really popular article titled The Deadly Bermuda Triangle for Argosy magazine.
And Argosy, that was a pulp magazine, right?
Yeah.
Known for adventure stories, sometimes sensational stuff.
Exactly. Pulp publications thrived on drama, adventure, and sometimes blurring the lines between fact and fiction. Gaddis's article was the first to really bundle together several different historical disappearances under this single catchy name, giving the whole phenomenon a marketable identity.
But the idea that this area was weird or dangerous, that goes back way further than the 1960s, doesn't it?
Oh, much further. The raw material for the legend was accumulating for centuries. Some of the earliest recorded anomalies that people later pointed to actually come from the 15th century, from Christopher Columbus's own logbook.
Columbus? Really? He sailed through there?
He did, on his first voyage in 1492, and his logs documented some pretty bizarre things, at least bizarre to him and his crew. You have to imagine their perspective.
Okay, well, like what?
Well, one night, he recorded seeing a great flame of fire, his words that seemed to fall from the sky right into the ocean.
Wow. Okay, maybe a meteor?
Probably a meteorite burning up in the atmosphere, yes. But imagine seeing that from a tiny wooden ship in the middle of nowhere in 1492. It would definitely fuel superstition about the sea being cursed or unnatural.
And wasn't there something about lights, too?
Yeah, another night he saw a strange, faint, flickering light in the distance. He described it like a small wax candle rising and falling. He thought it might be land, maybe a signal fire, but there was no land there. Just open ocean. Gave the crew false hope for a bit.
But the compass thing, that seems more directly related to navigation, to actual danger.
That was probably the most unsettling for him. At one point, deep in what we now call the triangle, he noted his compass needle did something completely unexpected. It deflected way off to the west, away from where Polaris, the North Star, indicated true north should be. Then the next day, it shifted back east.
For a navigator totally reliant on that compass, That must have been terrifying.
Absolutely terrifying. It suggested something was fundamentally wrong with the natural order, something interfering with the one instrument they trusted implicitly.
Okay, fast forward a bit. The Sea Venture in 1609. That wasn't a mystery disappearance, but it added to the area's reputation.
Definitely. The Sea Venture was an English ship carrying colonists to Jamestown. It got caught in a massive hurricane, a really powerful tropical storm, and was wrecked spectacularly off the coast of Bermuda.
But the crews survived, mostly.
Most survived, yeah. They were stranded on Bermuda for almost a year building new ships. But their experience on those islands, constantly battered by storms, surrounded by treacherous reefs, cemented this idea back in England that Bermuda was a dangerous, almost enchanted or cursed place, a devil's isle.
And that story had a huge cultural impact, didn't it?
It absolutely did. The tales of the wreck and survival reached England and directly inspired William Shakespeare.
The Tempest.
Exactly. The Tempest is set on a remote, enchanted island, drawing heavily from the Sea Venture accounts. So, thanks to Shakespeare, Bermuda became permanently fixed in the popular imagination as a place of magic, storms, and danger.
So even centuries before Gaddis coined the name, you had this background radiation of weird lights, compass problems, and shipwrecks associated with the area.
Precisely. And you see it continue with early documented losses, too. Take the USS Pickering, an American brig, in 1800.
What happened there?
Sailed from Delaware heading to the West Indies with 90 people aboard, vanished, probably lost in a gale, but no wreckage, no survivors, nothing. Just gone.
Added to the list.
And then the schooner Wildcat in 1822 lost somewhere between the Caribbean and Bermuda. Some historians think maybe piracy related to the sort of unofficial naval conflict happening then.
The quasi-war.
Right. But again, no proof, just another ship swallowed whole by the sea, adding to this growing unease about that particular stretch of ocean.
Okay, so the stage was set with these early incidents and superstitions. But the 20th century is when the legend really took off, fueled by some truly dramatic stories. And we have to start with maybe the most purely Gothic one, the ghost ship, the Ellen Austin.
Ah, yes, the Ellen Austin. This story, supposedly from 1881, is classic maritime horror. It has everything.
Lay it out for us.
Okay, so the Ellen Austin, a trading vessel, is sailing along, supposedly finds another sailing ship, just adrift, in the Sargasso Sea, which is itself kind of creepy, all that seaweed.
Right, the sea that can trap ships.
Exactly. And this ship they find, it's perfectly intact, sails are set, cargo's fine, but there's nobody aboard, just empty, eerily empty.
Okay, creepy. So what does the Ellen Austin's captain do?
Sees a chance for salvage money. He puts a small prize crew, some of his own sailors, onto the derelict ship. The plan is to sail both ships back to port together.
Makes sense commercially.
So they sail in tandem for a few days, but then, and here's where it gets really weird, a storm blows up, or maybe it's a thick fog, the two ships get separated.
And when they find the other ship again?
The Ellen Austin finds the derelict ship, floating aimlessly again, sail set, cargo intact, but the prize crew vanished, completely gone, no sign of struggle, nothing.
Okay, that is genuinely unsettling.
But wait, it gets worse. According to the legend, the captain, incredibly, decides to try again. He puts a second prize crew on the cursed ship.
You're kidding. After the first crew vanished.
That's the story. And wouldn't you know it, the mysterious fog rolls in again, the ships get separated, and this time, the derelict ship and the second prize crew are never seen again. Gone forever.
Wow. Okay, that is an absolutely chilling story. If you hear that, you're thinking something deeply weird is happening out there. But how much of it is true?
And that's the crucial question for our deep dive. It's a fantastic story, but it seems to be almost entirely fabricated.
Fabricated. How do we know?
Well, the most reputable source for shipping records, especially back then, is Lloyd's of London. They kept meticulous records for insurance purposes.
And what do Lloyd's lists say about the Ellen Austin's voyage in 1881?
They record it as completely uneventful. No mention of finding a derelict ship, no mention of losing any crew members, let alone 2 prize crews.
So where did this incredibly detailed, terrifying story come from?
It seems to have originated years later, in 1906, in a rather sensationalist story printed in a local American newspaper. It got picked up, repeated, embellished over the decades, and became accepted as fact in many Bermuda Triangle books.
A perfect example of a myth overwriting reality because it's just a better story.
Exactly. It highlights how powerful narrative is in shaping these legends.
Okay, let's move to something undeniably real and tragic. The USS Cyclops in 1918.
Yes, this is a major confirmed loss. And it remains the largest single loss of life in U.S. Navy history not related to direct combat.
Tell us about the ship. It was huge, right?
Massive for its time. A collier, basically a bulk carrier, over 160 meters long. She was carrying over 300 crew and passengers, plus a vital cargo. 10,000 tons of manganese ore needed for steel production during World War I.
And where was it gone?
Sailing from Brazil to Baltimore. Her last confirmed port of call was Barbados in early March 1918. She sailed north from there and vanished.
Vanished, a ship that big. During wartime, when the Atlantic was heavily monitored.
Completely vanished. No distress signal was ever received, no wreckage, no debris, no lifeboats, nothing was ever found. Despite extensive searches, it was as if she just ceased to exist.
Were there theories? Storms?
Yeah.
Mechanical failure?
There were, and one key factor is that sources confirm she was seriously overloaded. She was carrying about 2,000 tons more manganese ore than her design capacity. That kind of overloading could absolutely make a ship vulnerable to structural failure, especially in heavy seas.
So a sudden catastrophic breakup is plausible.
Very plausible. It could have happened so fast the crew had no time to react or send a signal. But because no trace was ever found, the mystery lingered. It was so baffling that President Woodrow Wilson himself was quoted as saying, "Only God and the sea know what happened to that great ship."
And the story gets even weirder, doesn't it? With her sister ships.
It does. Two of her sister ships, the USS Porteous and USS Nereus, built to the same design, also vanished without a trace in the same general area much later in 1941 during World War II.
Any explanation for those U-boats?
U-boats were certainly active, but there's no record of them sinking those specific ships. Again, no wreckage, no signals. So those losses were also chalked up as cause unknown, creating this deeply unsettling pattern of three sister ships all disappearing in the same region. It really feeds the narrative of a uniquely dangerous zone.
Okay, but the one incident that truly cemented the Bermuda Triangle myth in the public consciousness, the one everyone knows, has to be Flight 19.
Absolutely. December 5th, 1945. This is the event that Vincent Gaddis heavily featured, and it became the cornerstone of the entire legend.
And this wasn't some old sailing ship. This was the modern U.S. Navy.
5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers. These were tough, reliable planes that had seen extensive service in World War II. They took off from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on a routine training mission. 14 experienced airmen aboard.
And the flight leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, he wasn't a rookie, was he?
Far from it. Taylor was highly experienced, a combat veteran with something like 2,500 flight hours, many of them in Avengers. He knew these planes inside and out.
What was the mission supposed to be?
A standard navigation exercise. Fly east for a bit, turn north over the Bahamas, then turn southwest back to base. A triangular route, ironically enough. Everything seemed normal at first.
But then things went wrong after the second turn.
Yes. Taylor radioed back to the control tower. He sounded confused, disoriented. He reported that both of his compasses, his primary and backup, were malfunctioning. He couldn't get a reliable heading.
Both compasses failing simultaneously. That seems unlikely.
Highly unlikely, yeah. And crucially, based on his transmissions, it became clear he thought he was over the Florida Keys, much further south and west than he actually was. He was likely over the Bahamas.
And that mistake was critical.
Absolutely critical. Because if you think you're over the Keys and want to get back to Florida, you fly north. But if you're actually over the Bahamas, flying north or east takes you further out over the open Atlantic, away from land.
And that's what he did. He led them the wrong way.
It seems so. The radio transmissions became increasingly confused. Ground control tried desperately to figure out his position and guide him back, suggesting he turn on his emergency transmitter, but he apparently didn't. Other pilots in the flight could be heard questioning his decisions, urging him to fly west towards the setting sun, towards land.
But he wouldn't relinquish command.
No. He seemed convinced his instruments were wrong and that he knew where they were, even as they flew further into danger. Conditions worsened, darkness fell, fuel ran low. One of his last chilling transmissions was something like, "We seem to be entering whitewater. We are completely lost."
Whitewater, what does that even mean from a plane?
Nobody knows for sure. Heavy waves breaking, strange atmospheric conditions. Some theorists connected to the electronic fog idea we'll discuss later. Then the transmissions faded out. They were gone.
5 planes, 14 men, just gone. But the story doesn't end there, does it? The search party.
Right. The tragedy compounded. A large PBM Mariner flying boat, a search and rescue plane with 13 crew members, was sent out immediately to look for Flight 19. It also vanished, took off, made a routine radio check about 3 minutes later, and then silence. Never heard from again.
So 6 planes, 27 men lost in a single afternoon, with no confirmed wreckage found for any of them.
Exactly. The Navy conducted a massive investigation. Initially, the report blamed pilot error on Elteen Taylor's part, suggesting disorientation.
But that was controversial.
Hugely. Taylor's mother protested vigorously, arguing they couldn't blame her son without any physical evidence. The Navy eventually amended the report to cause unknown, and that's where it officially stands.
And there was that weird discovery years later, right? The Avengers found off Florida.
Yeah, in 1991, treasure hunters found the wreckage of 5 TBM Avengers sitting on the seabed relatively close to Florida. Everyone thought, this is it, Flight 19 found.
But it wasn't them.
Nope. Checks of the bureau numbers, the serial numbers on a wreckage proved they were a different group of Avengers, lost on different training flights at different times, which just adds another layer of strangeness, the fact that 2 separate groups of 5 Avengers were lost in that same general area.
Wow. Okay, one more big story before we get into theories. The ship that came back, sort of, the SS Cotopaxi.
Yes, the Cotopaxi. This cargo ship disappeared back in 1925, sailing from Charleston to Havana. Standard triangle victim story for decades vanished, no trace, no signal, became part of the lore.
But then, it was found.
Well, wreckage was found, yes. Starting in the 1980s, divers explored an unidentified wreck off St. Augustine, Florida, which they nicknamed the Bear Wreck. It wasn't until January 2020, after painstaking research by marine archaeologists comparing ship plans, historical records, and the wreck site itself, that it was definitively identified as the Cotopaxi.
So, mystery solved, but it was found outside the typical triangle boundaries.
Yeah, about 65 kilometers off the Florida coast, which raises questions. Did it sink there? Or did the wreck drift significantly due to currents like the Gulf Stream? And why did it take so long to identify wreckage that had been known for decades?
It shows how even a solved case can still feel mysterious because of the time gaps and the way the ocean hides things.
Absolutely. It reinforces the difficulty of finding definitive answers in that environment.
Okay, we've covered the history, the name, the big disappearances. Now we dive into the really exotic stuff, the explanations that go way beyond storms and pilot error.
Right. Once Gaddis lit the fuse, and then Charles Berlitz published his mega bestseller, The Bermuda Triangle, in 1974, the floodgates opened for paranormal and speculative theories. And the biggest, most enduring one has to be Atlantis.
Atlantis, the lost city, how does that connect?
Berlitz's main theory, the one that really captured the public imagination, was that Atlantis wasn't just lost. It was located on the seabed within the Bermuda Triangle.
Okay.
And he proposed that the disappearances were caused by leftover Atlantean technology, specifically giant energy crystals or maybe submerged pyramids that were still emitting powerful rays or fields of energy. These energy bursts, he suggested, could disrupt instruments, disintegrate ships and planes, or even create spatial anomalies.
Wow, energy crystals.
Yep.
That's quite a leap. Was there any evidence cited for this?
Well, the main piece of evidence often linked to the Atlantis theory is the Bimini Road.
Right, I've heard of that. Underwater rocks that look like paving stones.
Exactly. Discovered in 1968 near Bimini in the Bahamas, it's a formation of large, flat, rectangular limestone blocks lined up in roughly parallel rows. It really does look like a man-made wall or road foundation submerged underwater.
So, proof of Atlantis.
Well, proponents certainly claimed it was, but geologists have studied it extensively, and the overwhelming scientific consensus is that it's a natural formation called beach rock. The way this type of rock forms and fractures under tidal stress can create those remarkably regular rectangular shapes. It looks artificial, but it's likely natural geology.
Okay, what about the giant pyramids? I've seen headlines about massive glass pyramids found on the seabed.
Ah, yes, the Crystal Pyramid claims. Stories circulated, especially in tabloids and online, about oceanographers finding enormous, perfectly smooth pyramids, sometimes described as being made of crystal or glass, sitting on the ocean floor, supposedly taller than the Great Pyramid of Giza.
Any truth to that?
Zero verifiable truth. Our sources are clear. These claims originated in sensationalist media, not from any credible oceanographic surveys or scientific reports. No such structures have ever been documented by legitimate researchers. It's pure fantasy, but it feeds the Atlantis narrative.
Okay, moving on from ancient aliens, what about time warps or this electronic fog idea?
This is another popular category of theory, often based on specific pilot accounts. The most famous is Bruce Gernon's experience from 1970.
He was a pilot. What happened to him?
Yeah, an experienced pilot flying from the Bahamas back to Florida. He reported flying into a very unusual cloud formation. It started small, then rapidly expanded into a huge tunnel-shaped vortex, almost like flying through a donut hole. He described it as a thick, swirling electronic fog.
Electronic fog. What did that mean? Instruments went haywire.
Completely haywire. He said his compasses were spinning wildly, other instruments were malfunctioning, and he even felt a sense of weightlessness, almost like zero gravity. It sounds eerily similar to the kind of instrument chaos reported by Flight 19, doesn't it?
It really does. But the kicker for Gurnan's story is the time thing, right?
Exactly. When he finally broke out of this fog tunnel, he realized he'd covered the distance back to Miami about 160 kilometers in only 35 minutes. That flight should normally have taken him around 75 minutes.
And was that just his perception, or was it confirmed?
This is the intriguing part. He claimed, and later accounts supported, that air traffic control radar tapes confirmed his unusually rapid transit over that distance. He essentially seemed to skip across a huge chunk of airspace in an impossibly short time.
So his theory was he flew through a time warp.
Basically, yes.
Okay.
He believes he encountered some kind of localized distortion in time and space, generated by this electronic fog, which might be a natural but rare atmospheric or electromagnetic phenomenon. It offers a paranormal explanation for how Flight 19 could have become so utterly lost so quickly.
Okay, that's pretty mind-bending. What about other weird phenomena? UFOs? Strange lights?
Oh yeah, the Triangle is a hot spot for UFO and USO unidentified submerged object reports. You get accounts from pilots, like one in 2014, who reported a near miss with an object moving at incredible speed. Passengers on commercial flights have recorded strange lights or objects hovering over the ocean.
Moving in ways conventional aircrafts can't.
That's often the claim: instantaneous acceleration, impossible turns, sometimes diving into or emerging from the water without a splash. It fuels speculation about extraterrestrial bases or activity in the region.
And the lights in the water itself. Not just objects, but the water glowing.
Right. Reports go back centuries of sailors seeing vast patches of the ocean light up with an eerie glow. Now, the scientific explanation is usually bioluminescence light produced by marine organisms.
But some reports describe patterns.
Exactly. Sometimes they describe perfect circles, spirals, or lights moving in formation deep underwater, which doesn't really fit the random patterns of typical bioluminescence. Again, it leads to speculation about unknown energy sources or submerged objects.
And there was that weird sound, the bloop.
Ugh, the bloop. Recorded in 1997 by NOAA hydrophones underwater microphones. It was this incredibly powerful, ultra-low frequency sound, picked up thousands of miles away, originating somewhere in the South Pacific, but often gets associated with deep-sea mysteries relevant to the Triangle discussion.
And it sounded organic.
It did initially. Very loud, rhythmic. It suggested something absolutely enormous living in the abyss. Later analysis suggested it was likely the sound of massive icebergs calving or cracking, but for a while it really fueled the unknown giant creature theory.
And finally, phantom radio signals. SOS calls from lost ships.
That's another persistent, creepy category of story. Tales of ships or planes passing through the area and picking up faint, distorted distress called SOS sinking, sometimes identifying ships that officially sank decades earlier.
Like radio ghosts.
Pretty much. Sometimes the messages are fragmented, frantic, talking about being approached by something unseen. The rational explanation might involve weird atmospheric radio propagation, maybe signals bouncing off the ionosphere for years. But the paranormal explanation is, well, ghosts in the machine, or echoes across time. Chillin' stuff.
Before we had theories about Atlantis, energy crystals, and time warps, what did sailors blame weird disappearances on? Monsters, right?
Absolutely. For centuries, if a ship vanished inexplicably, especially in northern waters, the go-to explanation was often the Kraken.
The legendary giant squid or octopus from Norse mythology.
It's exactly. Tales told by sailors from Norway, Greenland, Iceland, descriptions of a sea monster so huge it could pull entire ships down to the depths with its massive tentacles.
It's your myth, obviously.
Or, well, here's the fascinating part. Science eventually proved the sailors weren't entirely wrong. The creature behind the Kraken legends is almost certainly the giant squid Architeuthis, and it is very, very real.
When was its existence actually confirmed?
Scientifically, it was confirmed about 150 years ago in the mid-19th century. The key evidence was finding pieces of them washed ashore, particularly their beaks.
Beaks, like a parrot's beak.
Sort of, but much larger and made of incredibly tough chitin. They found one in Denmark that was like 7 or 8 centimeters across. From the size of the beak, scientists could extrapolate the immense size of the animal it belonged to. Since then, we've identified over 20 related species of giant and colossal squid.
Have we actually seen one alive?
Yes, but only relatively recently thanks to deep-sea exploration tech. The first video footage of a live giant squid in its natural habitat was captured in 2004, actually in the North Atlantic, relatively near the Triangle region.
What did it look like? How big was it?
This one was estimated at around 9 meters long, maybe 30 feet.
Yeah.
The footage showed it attacking bait lines aggressively. It was incredible to finally see this near-mythical creature alive.
And how big can they actually get? What's the record?
The largest specimen found measured around 18 meters, that's nearly 60 feet long, including the tentacles, and weighed almost a ton. But based on beak sizes and other fragments, scientists estimate the absolute largest ones might reach, well, maybe 45 meters or more.
45 meters. That's longer than a basketball court.
Exactly. Truly colossal. Now, think about encountering something like that from a small wooden sailing ship in the 17th or 18th century.
Okay, so let's analyze the threat. Could a giant squid actually sink a ship?
It depends on the ship. Let's consider their biology. They have the largest eyes in the animal kingdom, basketball-sized, perfect for spotting silhouettes against the faint light filtering down from the surface. They hunt from below.
So they'd attack from underneath.
Most likely. They have 8 powerful arms and 2 incredibly long feeding tentacles, all covered in suckers lined with sharp, claw-like teeth. Against a relatively fragile wooden hull of an old sailing ship, a surprise attack from a creature that size, wrapping its tentacles around, could absolutely do serious damage.
Like crushing the hull, tearing masts down.
Plausibly, yes. Crushing timbers, ripping sails, snapping masts. If it caused a major breach below the waterline, the ship could flood and sink very quickly, potentially too fast for anyone to launch a lifeboat or send a signal. Survivors, if any, would just have this terrifying tale of a monster attack.
But what about modern ships? Could it take down a steel tanker?
That seems much less likely. The sheer size and strength of a large modern metal vessel would probably be too much for even a giant squid. Maybe it could cause some damage or confusion, but actually sinking it? Probably not.
So the Kraken theory is more relevant to the historical disappearances, the older sailing ships that contributed to the area's early reputation.
Precisely. It offers a scientifically grounded explanation for some of the earliest unexplained losses. While it doesn't explain Flight 19 or the Cyclops, it validates the idea that very real, very large dangers lurked in those waters, dangers that easily fueled monstrous legends.
Okay, let's pivot from monsters and myths to hard science. What are the leading natural explanations for ships and planes vanishing suddenly, without even a distress call?
Probably the most compelling and scientifically validated explanation for rapid maritime sinkings is the rogue wave, sometimes called a killer wave.
These aren't tsunamis, right? They happen out in the open ocean.
Correct, not tsunamis. Rogue waves are spontaneous, exceptionally large waves that can form unexpectedly, even in relatively calm seas. They are much, much larger, sometimes 2 or 3 times larger than the surrounding waves.
How do they form?
It's complex wave dynamics. Basically, different wave trains moving across the ocean can interact and constructively interfere, focusing their energy into one enormous, almost vertical wall of water. We're talking waves that can reach 30 meters, maybe 100 feet high.
The height of a 10-story building appearing out of nowhere.
Pretty much. And their existence wasn't even definitively proven until 1995, when one was measured hitting the Dropner oil platform in the North Sea. Before that, sailors' tales of holes in the sea or walls of water were often dismissed as exaggeration.
So how could a rogue wave cause a silent disappearance? Was this tested?
It was. There was a fascinating experiment involving the wreck of a 12-meter yacht, the Krimgillen, which was found damaged in the Triangle. They built a precise scale model of this yacht.
And hit it with a wave.
Exactly. In a massive wave tank facility, they generated a scaled equivalent of a 30-meter rogue wave. The result was dramatic. The wave completely overwhelmed the model instantly, engulfing it, breaking it apart.
So fast enough to prevent an SOS.
Absolutely. The study concluded a rogue wave could strike with such suddenness and force that a ship could be destroyed or submerged literally in seconds, leaving no time for a distress call and scattering debris immediately. It's a very plausible explanation for many sudden losses at sea.
Okay, what about the methane hydrate theory? The idea of gas bubbles sinking ships.
This one is more controversial, but gets talked about a lot. The theory centers on methane gas trapped in frozen hydrate deposits under the seabed, especially along continental shelves, which exist near parts of the triangle.
And this gas can erupt.
Potentially, yes. Triggered by perhaps an underwater landslide or seismic activity, a huge plume of methane gas could suddenly erupt from the seabed and bubble up to the surface.
How would that sink a ship?
The core idea is that the massive amount of gas bubbles drastically reduces the density of the water in that specific area. If a ship happens to be right above the eruption, the water suddenly becomes less buoyant, unable to support the ship's weight, and the ship supposedly just drops like a stone, sinks instantly.
Sounds plausible. Was that tested too?
It was in a major experiment using a 7.5-meter steel boat called the Phoenix. They simulated the methane release using compressed air pumped through a grate on the seabed.
And did it work? Did the boat sink?
Well, not in the first attempt. When they released the bubbles under the intact, empty boat in open water, the rising bubbles actually created an upward current that helped keep the boat afloat. It didn't sink due to loss of buoyancy.
So the core mechanism didn't work.
Not on an intact hull, no. That was a significant finding. But they tried again. They thought, what if the ship is already damaged or overloaded, like maybe the Cyclops was?
So they simulated that.
Yes, they loaded the Phoenix with about 2,000 kilograms of bricks to lower it in the water and simulate being compromised. Then, when they released the bubbles, the intense turbulence and churning water created by the gas plume quickly swamped the boat, washing over the sides and filling it, causing it to sink.
So the turbulence sank it, not the density change itself.
That was the conclusion. Methane hydrate eruptions might contribute to sinking a vessel that's already in trouble by swamping it, but the original idea of instantly losing buoyancy seems unlikely for an intact ship. Plus, critics point out there's no geological evidence of major methane eruptions in that specific region for thousands of years.
Okay, moving up from the sea into the air, what about atmospheric hazards? Weird clouds.
Meteorologists have proposed a theory involving something called hexagonal clouds. These are very large, honeycomb-shaped cloud formations, sometimes stretching up to 90 kilometers across, that have been observed over the ocean in the Triangle region via satellite.
And what's dangerous about hexagonal clouds?
The theory is that these specific cloud structures can generate incredibly powerful downdrafts called microbursts. Think of it as a concentrated column of air plummeting straight down from the cloud base at extreme speeds.
How extreme?
Potentially up to 270 kilometers per hour, like an air bomb hitting the surface. When this hits the ocean, it can create localized, violent turbulence and massive waves capable of capsizing a ship. For an aircraft flying underneath, it could cause catastrophic structural failure or force it instantly into the sea.
And lightning. That's a big risk in tropical storms, right? Could it bring down a plane instantly?
It absolutely could, and this is a strong contender for explaining the loss of the PBM Mariner search plane that went after Flight 19. Experiments have been done simulating powerful lightning strikes on aircraft components.
What did they find?
They used massive voltage and amperage, simulating a strong natural strike on a replica wing section with a fuel tank. They found the strike could easily blow off the fuel cap and allow superheated plasma, the ionized gas of the lightning bolt, to enter the fuel tank's vent or drainage system.
And if that mixes with fuel vapor?
Boom. The experiments showed the resulting explosion was powerful enough to rupture the wing tank, causing the plane to basically flare up like a candle, as one report put it. A catastrophic mid-air explosion, leaving no time for a distress call, and likely obliterating the aircraft.
Makes sense, especially for the Mariner, which was known to have fuel vapor issues sometimes. Now, what about the Gulf Stream? How does that contribute?
The Gulf Stream is a huge factor in why finding wreckage is so difficult. It's a powerful, fast-moving ocean current, like a river within the ocean, flowing north along the western edge of the Triangle area.
How fast does it move?
It can move at speeds up to 5 knots, which is quite fast for an ocean current. So if a ship sinks or a plane crashes, any floating debris gets caught in this current and is rapidly swept hundreds, even thousands of kilometers away from the actual incident site.
Making searches incredibly difficult.
Exactly. Search teams arrive where the vessel was last reported, but the debris is already long gone, scattered over a vast area. This directly contributes to the vanished without a trace narrative, even when there was wreckage initially.
Lastly, the magnetic anomalies. Columbus saw weird compass stuff. Is that still a factor?
This is a classic part of the legend, tied to something called the agonic line.
What's that?
The agonic line is an imaginary line on the Earth's surface where true north geographic North Pole, and magnetic north, the direction the compass needle points, happen to align perfectly. Everywhere else, there's a difference called magnetic declination that navigators have to account for.
And the triangle used to be on this line.
Historically, yes. Part of the Agonic Line passed through the Bermuda Triangle region centuries ago. For early navigators relying solely on magnetic compasses and stars, hitting this line where the expected declination suddenly disappeared was genuinely confusing and could lead to significant navigational errors.
But the key word is historically.
Correct. The Earth's magnetic poles aren't fixed. They drift over time. Scientists have tracked this movement for centuries. The Agonic Line has long since shifted away from the Bermuda Triangle. It's now located somewhere over the Gulf of Mexico.
So modern compass problems in the triangle aren't due to some special magnetic anomaly there.
No. Compasses today behave no differently in the triangle than they do anywhere else on Earth with similar magnetic latitude. Any modern reports of compass malfunction are almost certainly due to instrument failure or perhaps localized electrical interference, not some inherent geographic magnetic weirdness unique to the triangle. That part of the legend is definitively debunked by modern science. All right, so we've been through the history, the spooky stories, the exotic theories, the very real natural dangers. Now we need to land on the skeptic's view, the statistical reality check.
And the core argument from skeptics boils down to something pretty simple, doesn't it?
It really does. Traffic volume. The fundamental point is that the Bermuda Triangle isn't some remote, empty corner of the ocean. It's the opposite.
It's right off the coast of Florida, connecting North America to the Caribbean, South America, Europe.
Exactly. It's one of the most heavily trafficked shipping corridors and flight paths on the entire planet. Countless cargo ships, cruise liners, private yachts, commercial airliners, small planes, they all transit through this relatively compact area every single day.
So just by sheer numbers.
Just by sheer probability, you're going to have more accidents, more incidents, more disappearances in an area with vastly more traffic compared to a quiet part of the ocean. It's like comparing traffic accidents on a busy highway versus a deserted country road. More cars mean more potential incidents.
And the insurance industry seems to back this up, right? Lloyd's of London.
That's a really powerful piece of evidence. Lloyd's, the world's leading maritime insurer, has been assessing marine risk for centuries. They have vast amounts of data, and they do not charge higher insurance premiums for vessels sailing through the Bermuda Triangle.
Which means,
from a purely financial risk assessment perspective, based on hard data, they see no statistically significant increase in danger in that region compared to any other busy stretch of ocean. If there really was a mysterious force sinking ships at a higher rate, you can bet they'd be charging extra for it.
let's look at the actual incident numbers. You mentioned data from recent decades.
Yes, researchers analyzed global maritime incident databases, for instance, from 1982 to 2015. Over the 33-year period, they recorded about 361 significant maritime incidents within the commonly defined triangle boundaries.
Okay, 361 sounds like a fair number, but how does that compare globally?
It represents only about 4% of the worldwide total incidents during that time. Considering the traffic volume, that's not disproportionately high. But here's the most critical finding from that data.
What's that?
During that entire 33-year period, not one single vessel was officially recorded as having vanished without any trace within the triangle. The losses that did occur had explanations: storms, mechanical failures, collisions, and usually involved wreckage or survivors being found eventually. The classic vanished into thin air scenario just wasn't happening in the modern data.
So the modern reality doesn't match the legend at all.
Not really. And when you compare the triangle to other known dangerous waters globally...
Like where?
Well, areas like the South China Sea, the waters around Indonesia and the Philippines notorious for typhoons, reefs, and unfortunately piracy, or even the North Sea or the Black Sea, they all consistently report higher rates of ship losses than the Bermuda Triangle.
So the triangle isn't even in the top 10 most dangerous spots?
Not even close, according to the statistics used by maritime safety organizations and insurers.
What about planes? Does the same statistical debunking apply?
Largely, yes. Aviation safety databases, like those from the NTSB in the U.S., show that the vast majority of aircraft accidents near the Triangle region happen during the critical phases of flight, takeoff, or landing.
Near the busy airports in Florida, the Bahamas, Bermuda.
Exactly. These are typically related to factors like weather near the airport, mechanical issues, bird strikes, or pilot error during approach or departure, not mysterious mid-ocean disappearances far from land.
Okay, so if the statistics are so clear, if insurers aren't worried, if it's not even a top danger zone, Why does the myth persist so strongly? Why are we even talking about it?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It really comes down to human psychology and the power of a good story.
We prefer the mystery.
We often do. Let's be honest. Stories about ancient Atlantean death rays, time warps, UFOs, and sea monsters are just way more exciting, more compelling than the mundane reality of bad weather, engine failure, navigational errors, or simply the statistical certainty of accidents in a crowded area.
Berlitz's book sold 20 million copies talking about the paranormal stuff.
Exactly. That tells you what people want to believe, or at least what fascinates them. The scary, unexplained story has far more cultural staying power than a dry statistical report debunking it.
And the media played a huge role initially. Gaddis's article.
Absolutely. Gaddis created a compelling narrative framework in 1964. Berlitz amplified it massively in the 70s. Once that Bermuda Triangle brand was established, it became a lens through which every subsequent incident in the area was viewed. Even perfectly explainable accidents got folded into the mythology because the framework already existed.
So the triangle is unique, maybe not as a place on the map, but as a cultural phenomenon, a reflection of our fascination with the unknown.
That's a great way to put it. It's like a mirror of our fantasy, as the outline suggests. It persists because it taps into something deep in our psyche, our fear of the vast, uncontrollable ocean, our love of mystery, and maybe our desire to believe there's more to the world than just the mundane and the statistically probable. Hashtag outro. So let's try and synthesize this deep dive. What have we really learned about the Bermuda Triangle? It is definitely a potentially dangerous patch of ocean, no doubt about it.
But dangerous because the Atlantic Ocean itself can be incredibly violent, right? Hurricanes, massive storms, unpredictable currents like the Gulf Stream.
Exactly. And dangerous simply because it's incredibly crowded with ships and planes. It's a confluence of natural maritime hazards and extremely high traffic density.
So the unexplained disappearances, when you drill down into the specifics, often seem to come down to, well, plausible explanations. Maybe human error, especially with older navigation, or natural events happening too fast for an SOS.
Precisely. Things like a sudden rogue wave strike, a catastrophic mid-air explosion from lightning, rapid structural failure due to overloading or maintenance issues, or simply getting lost due to instrument failure and running out of fuel, like probably happened to Flight 19, and the Gulf Stream ensures the evidence often vanishes quickly.
But it is interesting, isn't it, that some of those old sailors' tales that fed the early myth actually turned out to have a basis in reality.
Yeah, that's a fascinating takeaway. The idea of monstrous waves capable of swallowing ships, rogue waves are real, the legends of giant krakens pulling ships under, giant squid capable of attacking ships are real. Science eventually validated parts of the very legends it later sought to debunk. The danger sailors felt was genuine, even if their explanation was mythical.
So the real enduring mystery isn't so much what is happening in the water, but maybe why we remain so captivated by the paranormal explanation, even when the evidence points elsewhere.
It really speaks to the power of narrative, the allure of the unknown, doesn't it? We seem to need mystery, even if we have to invent it sometimes.
Okay, so we'll leave you with a final thought to ponder. The Bermuda Triangle might be the ultimate case study in legend versus statistics. Think about other famous mysteries, historical disappearances, strange phenomena. How many do you think are most likely explained by simple human factors or natural forces rather than the supernatural or conspiratorial?
And maybe ask yourself this. If Flight 19 had just been officially recorded back in 1945 as lost at sea due to navigational failure and fuel exhaustion, would we even remember L.T. Taylor and his crews today? Would their story be told 80 years later?
Probably not. The legend, in a strange way, gave them a form of immortality that a simple, tragic accident report never could have. Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
We'll see you next time.